This is the Almost Timely newsletter for the week of February 26th, 2023. What's on my mind this week? Let's talk about large language models and how they work. Large language models like ChatGPT. So let's take some time to deconstruct the architecture of a large language model like InstructGPT or GPT-3. These models, which power useful tools like GoCharlie and ChatGPT, at first seem like magic, right, to the end user. However, understanding how they work will help you be more effective in their use. So how do they work? Well, in 1957, linguist John Rupert Firth said in a paper titled A Synopsis of Linguistic Theory the following critical sentence: "You shall know a word by the company it keeps." You shall know a word by the company it keeps. This single sentence summarizes the entirety of how large language models work. Every natural language processing model in artificial intelligence for the last 70 years is built on this axiom because language itself is built on this axiom. We understand a word based on the context we use it in. For example, if I talk about brewing some tea, I'm talking about a literal beverage made from the camellia plant, Camellia sinensis, I believe. If I talk about spilling some tea, I'm no longer talking about the beverage. I'm talking about gossip. The word tea changes in relation to its meaning, to its context, to the words around it. But it's not just the words immediately adjacent to the word in question. It's all the words in relation to each other. Every language that's functional has some kind of word order, a structure that helps us understand words. I'm brewing the tea. There's a clear subject, me. There's a verb, to brew. And then there's the object, the tea. The tea I'm brewing. This word order changes the focus, right? It's still intelligible, but conversationally, the focus is now on the tea instead of me. Brewing, I'm the tea. And now we're so out of order in English that this doesn't make much sense. This is a verb, subject, object word order, and yet this sentence would be perfectly appropriate and understandable if you were speaking Arabic or Gaelic or Irish or a few other languages where verb, subject, object is the word order. The structure of language is a matter of probabilities. I'm brewing the could be tea, could be coffee, could be beer, or some other thing that you brew. But if you widen the window of words around that sentence, the context makes the words more clear. The context becomes clear. If the immediate preceding sentence talks about a coffee shop, then probabilistically, statistically, the next word in that sentence is probably unlikely to be beer, right? So what does this have to do with ChatGPT? The underlying model of ChatGPT, called InstructGPT, which itself is a sister to the GPT-3 model, is built by taking massive amounts of text and converting that text into mathematical probabilities. There's a academic paper, sort of the seminal paper in the space, called Attention is All You Need by Ashish Vaswani and company. And this paper explains exactly how the transformer architecture, which is how ChatGPT works, how that architecture operates. First, you start with a huge amount of text, right? Which OpenAI has scraped pretty much the public web to feed its model. Next, in that huge body of text, you convert every word and parts of words into essentially a very large spreadsheet, a very large table with the probabilities of each word appearing next to another word assigned to each cell in a table. Imagine taking a sentence, right, and putting each word of that sentence in a column in a spreadsheet. Then take the same sentence and put each word in a row in the same spreadsheet. And then you calculate the number of times one word appears next to the another word. And you do this over and over and over again with every sentence, every word fragment in your body of text. That's why these models are so huge, so computationally intensive, so expensive to create, because you have to do a lot of this math. Well, the machines do this math on huge amounts of text. This is a process called embedding. And embedding basically means turning words into numbers. After that, when you're making a model like InstructGPT, there's a step called positional encoding. This is where word order is taken into account, the position of a word in relation to other words it's given. You give it mathematical weight so that in English, I'm brewing the tea has one set of values. And brewing I'm the tea, if that sentence occurred frequently, would have another value. And because you see I'm brewing the tea far more times in text on the internet than brewing I'm the tea, the former phrase and its positions will have more weight in the model, meaning that when it's time for ChatGPT to generate text, the probability that it'll spit out brewing I'm the tea is pretty low, right? While the probability of spitting out I'm brewing the tea is going to be fairly high. Here's what makes these transformer-based models like GPT-3 and InstructGPT different and better than their predecessors, the language models that have been used in the past few decades. These positional encodings don't just take into account the words immediately around a word. They take into account a lot of the text around each word, up to several thousand at a time. That's how they know to generate I'm brewing the tea and not I'm brewing the beer in the context of whatever prompting it to do, because probably in the text in the last few paragraphs beforehand, there was a reference to tea of some kind and not beer. If you've noticed when you're using a service like ChatGPT, when it spits out really long results, the results tend to cap out about a page worth of text, sometimes less, sometimes more. That is its attention window, right? That's how much text it can pay attention to and generate reasonable responses. That's important because that's how much context it can take in to understand what it is we're asking it to do. So now that we understand the underlying technology, what do we do with this information? As my friend and partner Katie Robert says, so what? It should be clear that words matter in our usage of these tools. Large language models can only make probability-based guesses from what they're provided, what we prompt them to do, which means that in general, the more relevant words in your prompt, the better the model will do. The more relevant words in your prompt, the better the model will do. Let's look at an example. I gave ChatGPT this prompt. Complete the sentence, I'm brewing the, and it responded, perfect cup of coffee to start my day. Now, that's a reasonable response to a terribly vague prompt. That is an awful prompt. What does it tell us about the underlying model? By its word choices, coffee is associated with the word brewing in the absence of any other context, and thus it created that response. Why? Because coffee is probably used near the word brewing a lot more than other beverages. Now, suppose we add some relevant contextual words to the prompt. So I said, complete the sentence. The tea house was packed with customers. I'm brewing the... And the model responded, last pot of tea for the day, and soon we'll have to close up shop. Just by giving it a relevant starter sentence with a more relevant word, tea, it narrowed the window of probability and gave more weight to tea, ending up with a sentence that matched the context I intended, right? It discarded coffee and beer and other brewed beverages, kombucha and all that stuff, and said tea. Probabilistically, I'm talking about tea. Now, what happens if I add even more context? I gave it another prompt. Complete the sentence. The tea house was packed with customers. We've been busy all day, and the Golden Rooibos was almost sold out. We still had plenty of yerba mate, but the oolong was starting to run low. As Karina retrieved the last box out of storage, she turned to me. I said, I'm brewing the... And the model responded, oolong now, so that we can offer it while it lasts. Could you please start serving the yerba mate to the customers? Karina nodded and quickly went to the counter, deftly pouring the hot yerba mate into gourds and adding just the right amount of sugar. For the model to spit that out, it needed more context, right? I added very specific types of tea. Yes, yerba mate is technically a Tisane because it's not made of the camellia plant. I know. But I added very specific types of tea and got even better results because the inclusion of tea names, a type of jargon, is highly specific and changes the probabilities of the words that should come next. And even the structure of the way I wrote the prompt, the model said this is clearly written like fiction, so I'm going to return it as a fictional response, right? As if it was fiction writing. Again, the rule is the more relevant words in your prompt, the better the model will do. It's kind of like SEO, right? The more relevant keywords you include in your prompt, the better the results you're going to get back. This is why I tell interested folks that these models are good at generation, creating stuff, but they are great at transformation. They rewrite like pros because they don't have to guess what the words are, right? They just know what they should be aligned to using known probabilities. They are fantastic. These tools are fantastic at rewriting text. If you want tools like ChatGPT to perform better, write out longer prompts with relevant keywords that help the model quickly understand the context of your ask. Instead of search engine optimization, maybe you have, chat optimization or prompt optimization. That'll be yet another career. My best performing prompts, over a page of text long. They're highly specific, contain a ton of detail, a fair amount of jargon when appropriate, and specific instructions which yield repeatable, reliable results. In software development, that's called requirements gathering, right? In creative work, that's the creative brief. In cooking, that's the recipe. You would never hand someone a 2-sentence recipe for baking a loaf of bread. I mean, not if you want edible bread at the end, right? You would never hand a creative team 2 sentences in a brief unless you don't care what the brief looks like. It's certainly not going to be whatever you had in mind. You need to provide a lot of detail to those entities to get the result you want, right? You provide a detailed recipe. You provide a detailed creative brief. For software development, you have a long requirements document so that people understand what the outcome is you're after. That's what you have to do with large language models as well. Not coincidentally, humans work the same way too, right? In general, you get better results when you over-communicate than when you under-communicate, when you don't communicate enough. And that is true for both these machines and humans. So that's the deal on ChatGPT and how these large language models work. What else is happening in the news this week? Did a great episode of the In-Ear Insights podcast this week on social media ROI. You're going to want to check that out. Plus, answered some questions, one of which was very interesting on whether narcissism is a success trait. And we dug into the world of mental health textbooks for a bit, but check that out. For courses, again, a lot of folks have been taking the LinkedIn course. If you've liked it, let me know. I would love to be able to feature your testimonials. We can anonymize it if you want, but love to hear from you if you've taken that course. In jobs this week, we got a ton of new positions. We have data analyst at Jobot, digital analytics analyst at U.S. Bank, digital content strategy manager at the Obama Foundation, director of AI advocacy and thought leadership at AMD. That one's real interesting. Director of demand generation at Active Campaign, director of analytics at Parallel Path, growth marketer at the Mom Project, manager of data collection and marketing tags at CVS, paid search marketing manager at United Healthcare, senior data analyst at Gigamon, senior data scientist at Apex Solutions, senior digital marketing manager at AR Marketing, senior director of data and analytics at WPromote, senior marketing manager at MKTG, senior social media manager at Empify, social media manager at Jobot, and SVP of digital at M-Booth Health. So a ton of positions that are popping up that people desperately need some help with. So check that out. In other news, YouTube adds some more Shorts performance insights, which is good because you don't really have any whole bunch right now. Organizations increasing their CX budgets, improving the ROI of your SEO strategy. We have in the news Spotify's AI DJ will talk to you while it plays your favorite songs. Novel forms of measurement for public relations, which is interesting. And then some fun stuff. The Super Star Trek 1978 game is the 25th anniversary, so there's a lot of fun games there. And some interesting stuff if you're ever thinking about showing a movie or a TV show in a public setting, the licensing that you need. As a social good reminder, this is the 1-year anniversary of the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So if you have the opportunity to donate to Ukraine, go to United24, which is u24.gov.ua. The conflict is ongoing, and the folks in Ukraine need our help to continue to resist the Russian invasion. Upcoming events, I'll be in Philadelphia in March for PodCamp Philly, and then Martechopia in London at the end of March. There's discount code MARSpeaker20 for 20% off the speaker price to that. And then B2B Ignite in Chicago in May of 2023. So lots of good stuff coming up and more on the way. That's the news for this week. Thank you for being here. As always, hope you found it helpful. Reply and let me know. You can put something in the comments here wherever you're watching this or you're listening to this, or if you're in the newsletter, just hit the reply button. And would love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe. I'll talk to you soon. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.